Hi, welcome to Full Bloom Block of the Month. We are now on month 6. So let's see what the fabrics look like for this month. So as you can see, there are 10 fabrics that you need to make up the 3 flowers for block number 6. You will only be given two fat quarters for this month. This is the second time that you'll see this fabric introduced. This is our background, and these 8 over here are pieces that are left over from previous blocks. So this is what those pieces might look like in your collection. So let's get these fabrics prepared with their freezer paper pieces so we can start assembling this block. So I made my tracing of block number 6. Traced out all of the freezer paper shapes and got to the cutting. So here's my 17 by 25 inch background, my 1.5 by 36 inch strip, my 7 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares, and my 6 8.5 by 8.5 inch squares that serve as the background for the little flowers. Okay, now here is fabric number 1. So this is a very complicated block, as you have figured out just by looking at the picture of it. But if you take your time, I really feel like it's not as complicated as it may look at first glance. So I'll stop and focus on these flower fabrics a little bit, just so you can really get an idea of what goes on each fabric. So this is flower number 1, which is the flower that's in the center of the block. You got this fabric in with block number 4. So if you look at the list on page 12 of block 6, you'll see that flower number 1, which says center and is orange. So you need to get 1 large flower piece. Now this flower piece will be covered up by 2 other flowers. So you can see the dotted line here, and almost the entire thing is covered around the edge of this large flower number 1. But this fabric is also the center 2A, so it's the center of flower number 2. The other pieces you need to get out of this piece of fabric is 1 single small flower, 3 small centers, and 3 large centers. So that's quite a bit of pieces that you get out of this fabric, and this fabric will then be retired. You won't need this one anymore. So the next fabric on the list says shading, which is dark orange, and you got this fabric, was introduced to you with block number 4, excuse me, and you'll see listed here that you need to get the shading pieces, which are numbered AA through HH, and I was able to trace those quite close together, so I just left them, because they're fairly small, on 1 piece of freezer paper, except for that little CC. This is also the center of block number 3, so this is center 3A. This fabric will also be retired, so there's plenty of room on this one, but that is the next fabric listed on your list of cutting. And then there's the light petals, which is light yellow. And this fabric was introduced to you in block number 4. You used a little piece of it in block number 5, and now it's used quite heavily in block number 6. So it's the large flower, which is flower number 2, and you also needed the pieces that were 1 and 2 in the triangle. So they're just some shading pieces that are going to use on another flower. 2 single small flowers, 2 small centers, and 5 large centers. So let me slide that down so you can see that. So this fabric too also will be retired after this block. Now this one was one of the ones that we used quite a bit in block number 3. Thank goodness this one gets retired now, but these are all the pieces that are labeled A through L. So these little ones I left together on one piece of freezer paper, just because again they're quite small. So this fabric was introduced to you in block number 3, but will be retired now in block number 6. And now we have our dark fuchsia, which is listed as center 1A, so that's center 1A. And also we needed to have pieces 1 through 12 used for this block. So I tried to keep them together as I could on the freezer paper, knowing that I do need to keep this up and leave some space at the bottom because this will be used again in block number 7. So you need to keep some space there for this fabric. So this one gets used 3 times, but so that is what's listed on page 12 as center 1A, and then it lists where else it's going to be used, which are pieces 1 through 12. So that's what you see here. And this yellow fabric was introduced to you in block number 3. It will also be retired now after block number 6, and that's just the one centerpiece 1B. So that's the last thing listed in the left-hand column, center 1B, light yellow, and that's all you need for that. Going up to the center column, so this is that dark orange that we introduced to you in a former block. And you're only going to use this fat quarter once for this block. So it's the large flower number 3, and we were able to use this again for some smaller flowers. So 1 single flower and 2 bottoms. This is also the center of one of the blocks. So this is center 2B, and then some large centers and 1 small center. So this fabric, this particular fat quarter is retired now. You'll see this fabric again in block 8, but it's from a former block. This fabric was introduced to you in block number 5 and will be used again in block number 6. So I just kept center 2C down here at the top or the bottom, however you're looking at it. It's the bottom to you and it's the top to me. So this fabric will be used again, so keep that handy. This is that one that I told you way back when, and that it was going to be quite tight as far as squeaking some pieces out of it. So this is the last you'll see of this light purple. This is being retired, and it's the center 3B. And then the last fabric is listed as center 3C, which is the dark purple, and this is a full fat quarter that you were introduced to with this block. So the first thing listed is the 1.5 by 18 inch strip, which is what we have here. And it's one little center, and then the rest are the small flowers. And this fabric is only used once, so you won't need to use it again, even though you have some space. But that's 3 singles and 1 bottom, 3 large centers and 1 small center for the single flowers. All right, so let's get this block layered. So you can see the sequence of how this multiple flower block goes. So here's our block and here's our tracing. Now this is my original tracing from when we did the block the first time, so don't look too closely at the lines on it. They may not match up to what you see on the current pattern. So I started with flower number 1, which was the large one in the center. I positioned it because it is the bottommost layer of everything. Everything else is on top of that. So I put that down and stitched it. And now I'm ready to place all of the shadows and highlights on top of flower number 1, which is which actually is all of pieces labeled AA through HH. and A, B, C, D, and E of those petal pieces. B isn't on here yet because B actually sits on top of one in the triangle, so I have to stitch that first before I can put B on. So there they are all placed, and I'm ready to get these glued and stitched, and then I can add B and begin the next layer. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so here's our next layer ready to go. I slid flowers 1 and 2 underneath and piece B over here because that sits on top of that. So that's our next layer. This will now be stitched, glued and stitched, and don't forget to press after each time you're done with a layer of stitching. We do recognize that some of these pieces are quite small, but they add the right amount of detail, so they are important. I know that they may be small and a little bit cumbersome to deal with, but they're definitely worth it. All right, let's get this stitched and we'll go to the next layer. Okay, so we're on to almost the last layer, but this layer is the completion of all the highlights and shadows, and we can put this center in, the first center for flower number 1. So that's the rest of the highlights and shadows. I know the pieces are little, delicate, but worth it, like I said. And there's that center. So I'll put the last center pieces on, and this block is done. There's our finished block. All the centers are on, all the highlights and shadows. It just needs to be squared up. And I'll put it on the design wall. And I'm ready to do some small flowers. I will show you where I'm at with my small flowers. If you saw my video on doing just the small flowers, then you'll know how to layer them and why we did them the way we did. But I will scan the wall so you can see the combinations I put together and where I'm at with that. Okay, so this is my design wall. This is what you see behind me at the beginning and the end of the videos. These are the blocks I have done currently, and the little blocks. Some are complete and some are not. I'll get up close so you can see them, the combinations I put together. So here's the upper corner, and you'll probably see my shadow in some of these shots, but that's the way the lighting is in this room. So here are some of my little flowers. Some of the combinations that I had put together. Again, all the fabrics look good together, so the combinations of these tops and bottoms and centers aren't really crucial. They can just be whatever you want them to be. And over here I have the ones that are not complete, because they're waiting for either a top or I'm deciding what centers to put on them. So that's what I have done so far. Well, like I said, I'm getting everything ready for block number 7, so that video should be coming to you soon. And in the meantime, get working on your little blocks and finishing up everything that you need to have done. All right, I'll see you back here soon.